God's chosen ones. 9 signs you're not ordinary. You're on heaven's list. They never had to tell you you were different. People, not in the spotlight, but in the silence. Not when they praised you, but when they couldn't explain you. You tried to play their games. You wore their names. But something inside refused to bow. From the moment you entered this world, you unsettled darkness. Even before you could speak, hell had already marked you as a threat. Because the truth is, you didn't become chosen. You remembered you were. So if your life has felt heavier, if your pain has been deeper, if your silence has been sacred, it's not random. It's recognition. And this story was heaven's whisper with your name on it. The ones who remember, they never knew where she came from, only that she didn't come to stay small. She was the child who stared at the stars too long, who asked questions the adults couldn't answer, who wept when others laughed, not because she was fragile, but because she felt things the world forgot to feel. Her name was spoken in confusion, not celebration. She's not like the others, they said, and they were right, because she wasn't from here in the way they were. She belonged here, but not because the world welcomed her, because heaven assigned her. From the outside, her life looked fractured. A family that misunderstood her, trauma that tried to break her, a birth that came too soon or too late. But if you looked closer, you'd see the patterns. You'd feel the resistance. You'd hear the echo of something divine hidden under all that pain. Because the moment she was born, the spiritual realm noticed, and so did darkness. This story isn't just hers. It's yours too. Maybe you've always felt like a misfit, like the black sheep, like the one who carried weights no one saw, and questions no one could answer. You didn't fit in because you weren't supposed to. You were sent here with memory folded into your bones, memory of a mission, the call, the kingdom you couldn't yet see, but could feel. So now, heaven is lifting the veil, not to show you something new, but to remind you of what your spirit never forgot. This is not a video, it's an awakening, and these 9 signs are not signs you're becoming chosen. They're signs you always were. Part 1. The strange child. You are always different. They noticed it before you did. Your parents couldn't explain it. Your teachers couldn't name it. Even your friends, the few who stayed, said it in quiet moments. You're just not like the rest of us. You weren't loud. You weren't rebellious. You simply saw things differently. While other kids played games, you stared at the clouds, waiting for God to speak. While others chased praise, you chased peace, even when it led to solitude. And the older you got, the more your soul grew out of step with the world around you. You were the quiet storm in the room, the child who asked questions that made grown-ups uncomfortable. Why does that man look sad even when he's smiling? Where do we go before we're born? Does God cry when people lie? They laughed. They told you to hush. That heaven listened because heaven sent you. You didn't belong in the systems they trusted. The classroom bored you. The church confused you. The world exhausted you. Because none of them spoke the language your soul was wired for. You weren't wired for applause. You were wired for assignment. And though you didn't know it then, you were walking a path older than your bloodline. Your family tried to mold you. Be more like your brother. Smile more like your sister. Why can't you be easier? But you weren't made to blend. You were made to break patterns. That's why you never stayed where you weren't seen. Why you felt alone in rooms full of people. Why you were treated as too much or not enough, because chosen ones aren't meant to fit in. They're meant to interrupt. So if your childhood was marked by questions you couldn't ask, emotions you couldn't share, and a loneliness that felt holy even before you had a name for it, know this: you weren't misunderstood by accident. You were hidden by design, and heaven didn't hide you to punish you. Heaven hid you to protect what wasn't ready to be revealed. You were never too different. You were too divine to be diluted. Part 2. The attempted exit, near death and divine intervention. You were never supposed to make it. Not according to the forces that saw you coming. Not according to the darkness that noticed your light before you even understood it yourself. Before you spoke your first word. A war had already begun. You don't talk about it often. Some say it was a freak accident. Others call it luck. But you know better. You weren't lucky to survive that crash. You weren't lucky the doctors revived you. You weren't lucky when you opened your eyes after the coma. You were protected. There was a moment, or maybe many, when death hovered too close. A choking, a fall, a drowning, moment when breath slipped and time felt like it paused to ask God if it was time. And heaven said, not yet. You didn't understand it back then. Why you felt targeted. Why danger followed you like a shadow. But now you're starting to see. You weren't being hunted randomly. You were being sought out by darkness. Because your arrival disrupted its plans. The enemy saw what you carried. Before you knew you carried it. The same way Herod feared a baby with a star above his birth. Hell feared you. That premature birth, that complication during delivery, that moment when the monitors flatlined. It wasn't medical, it was spiritual, and the forces that tried to take you out weren't after your body. They were after your mission. Even now, you carry the scars. Maybe not on your skin, but on your timeline. Moments where you should have died. Moments where the enemy whispered, let go. But something greater inside you said, not yet. Is it something? Purpose. You weren't saved just to survive. You were saved because your story wasn't finished. And if you've ever felt like death had your name, but heaven overruled it, then you're not reading this by chance. You're reading it because your survival was sacred. And every day you wake up now is proof that the mission still stands. Part 3. The Black Sheep. You carried what they ignored. They never said it out loud, but you always knew you weren't the favorite. You were the interruption in the family photo, the silence at the dinner table, the one whose presence felt like too much, and whose absence was barely noticed. But what they called rebellion was actually resistance. What they mistook as defiance was actually discernment, because from the beginning, you could feel what others refused to carry. While they argued over tradition, you were dreaming of transformation. While they blamed each other, you were begging heaven to break the cycle. They thought you were sensitive, too emotional, too distant, but they never saw the weight strapped to your soul, the unspoken responsibility to carry the pain they wouldn't face. You watched your family destroy each other with silence and pride. You saw generational patterns play out like reruns. Divorce, addiction, betrayal, shame. And you said, it ends with me. Not because you were better, but because you were chosen to carry what they couldn't finish. The black sheep isn't cursed. The black sheep is called, it's the one sent ahead, the one exiled from the table so they could build a new one. You felt alone, not because you lacked love, but because you carried a love that they didn't know how to receive. They couldn't understand you, so they rejected you, or resented you, or ignored you. But what they didn't realize was that your exile was divine strategy. You were never meant to inherit their dysfunction. You were born to disrupt it. So if you've always felt like you didn't belong to the people who raised you, if you've tried to love them but kept being wounded, if you've carried a sorrow that was never yours to begin with, you're not broken. You're burdened with purpose. The black sheep carries the cross, and the cross leads to resurrection. Part 4. The chaos you were born into. Dysfunction as refinement. You didn't choose where you came from, but heaven chose you to come through it. Your earliest memories weren't bedtime stories and lullabies. They were slammed doors, yelling matches, broken glass on the floor, and broken trust in the air. Home wasn't a sanctuary, it was survival. You looked around as a child and thought, this can't be normal. You saw things other kids didn't, heard words a child should never hear, and sometimes you were the secret they tried to bury. They said it was a family, but it felt more like a furnace, and somehow you kept breathing through the smoke. The dysfunction ran deep. Maybe it was addiction, maybe it was violence, maybe it was emotional silence, the kind that cuts without leaving bruises. You were raised in a war zone where no one acknowledged the war, and yet, while others became what hurt them, you became what healed. People ask how you turned out kind, how you learned to forgive, how you didn't repeat what you saw. The truth: fire doesn't just burn, it also forges. God allowed you to be born into the chaos, not to destroy you, but to refine you. You were the one chosen to carry light into the darkness. The things not because you were better, but because your soul could survive what others couldn't. You might carry scars from what happened behind closed doors. You might still have questions that no one has answered. You may still wrestle with memories that steal your sleep. But hear this: you are not a product of that pain. You are the prophecy that survived it. What the enemy tried to use as your curse has now become your credentials. Because those who come out of dysfunction with love still in their hearts carry heaven's authority in their hands. Part 5. Your birth was spiritually opposed. Before you took your first breath, something already sensed you were dangerous. Your arrival may have looked ordinary, but in the unseen realm it sent tremors. Because when a chosen one enters the world, hell hears it. Maybe you were overdue. 10 months in the womb and they said your mother was just late. Or maybe you came early, rushed into the world like a storm no one expected. The doctors panicked. The nurses whispered. Machines beeped, faster than they should have. But underneath the chaos was strategy. Heaven was sending a soul with assignment, and hell was trying to intercept it. Your mother may have told you the story. I almost lost you. You weren't breathing at first. You came out fighting. They didn't know the full picture, but the spirit realm did. You weren't just a baby. You were a blueprint, and the enemy tried to tear up the blueprint before you could walk in it. The birth room was a battlefield, one they didn't see, but your spirit remembers. That's why you've always felt a little out of sync with time, like you arrived on a delay or came too soon for the world you were born into. But it wasn't an accident. It was prophetic resistance. The moment Jesus was born, a star rose in the sky and darkness took notice. When you were born, you may not have had a literal star above your head, but you had something just as bright, a spiritual mark that said, this one carries fire. So if your birth was chaotic, if your arrival felt contested, if you've been told you weren't supposed to survive, believe this: you didn't just survive. You were summoned, and your arrival shook the shadows. Is the mission you carry was carved in heaven, long before you had a name. Part 6. the hidden code, marked for mission. You always thought it was just a mark? That strange shape on your shoulder, that line on your wrist, that freckle, scar, or birthmark that others asked about, but you could never explain. They said it was random, biological, a coincidence, but your spirit always knew. It meant something. You'd trace it with your fingers as a child, feeling something stir inside you, memory you couldn't access, but could feel, like a map carved into your skin, a symbol you carried without language. They called it a birthmark, but haven't called it a seal, because when God gives an assignment, He doesn't just speak it over you, He imprints it into you. The mark, that pattern on your body, it holds code, a spiritual signature, an encrypted script of who you are and why you're here. Prophets in Scripture were often marked, not just in calling, but in body. Jacob limped after wrestling with God. Paul bore the marks of Jesus after divine encounter. Even Christ carried wounds that became witnesses. So why would your mark be meaningless? You are not just skin and story. You are scroll and seal. You may have been mocked for it, or you may have hidden it, afraid people would stare, question, or label you. But the truth is, that mark is not a flaw. It's a fingerprint from heaven, a reminder that you were sent, not born by chance, but released by choice. So the next time you look in the mirror, and your eyes fall on that mysterious patch of skin, don't dismiss it. Ask heaven, what mission was written here? Because the answer may not come in words, but in remembrance. Part 7. Homesick for heaven, the ache for something beyond. You've never quite felt at home here. You've tried to be present, tried to belong, tried to care about the things others chase, the noise, the trends, the rewards. But something inside you always stayed distant, as if part of you was still staring at the sky. Even as a child, you'd gaze up at the stars and feel a strange ache in your chest. Not sadness, not longing for a person, but for a place, a home you couldn't describe, yet somehow missed. You've walked through this world like a traveler in a strange land. You speak its language, you wear its clothes, but your soul speaks something older, something eternal. People think you're deep. They say you overthink things, but they don't realize you're not overthinking, you're remembering, because chosen ones carry a kind of holy homesickness, an ache for something pure, a place where your soul once belonged, and to which it will one day return. And until then, you live with the tension between here and there, between now and eternity. That's why earth never fully satisfies you, why the parties bore you, why the chase for status leaves you empty, why you find more peace in a quiet sunrise than in a room full of noise. You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle ache that says, there's more than this. That pull that says, you came from somewhere holy, and you're here on assignment. You don't want to leave, but you're not trying to stay forever either, because deep down, you know this isn't the destination. It's the mission field. So when the world starts to feel heavy, when you feel out of place, when you long for something that no relationship, career, or city can satisfy, don't mistake that ache for depression. It's homesickness, and your home is heaven. Part 8. The old soul, wisdom without a teacher. You've always felt older than your age, not in years, but in knowing. There were no books on your shelf when it started, no mentors, no guides, just a whisper inside you that already knew. You could sit in silence for hours while others chased stimulation. You felt the pain behind people's smiles before they ever confessed it. And sometimes, even as a child, you spoke words that startled the room, not because you were trying to be profound, but because your soul had been here before. They called you mature, said you had an old soul, but they didn't understand what that really meant. It wasn't about intelligence. It was about remembrance. There was something ancient inside you, a light forged through lifetimes of refinement, wisdom that couldn't be taught, because it wasn't learned, it was inherited. You found yourself drawn to elders, not because you were trying to learn, but because their slowness matched your rhythm. You weren't rushed. You didn't crave attention. You just wanted truth. And often you were the one giving it, even to people twice your age. It made you different, sometimes even lonely, because when you carry deep waters in a shallow world, you often have to walk alone. But that solitude didn't break you. It built you. It trained you to listen, to discern what others missed. You may have flashes, moments when you feel you've seen this before, lived this before, known someone before even speaking their name. These aren't accidents. They are echoes, echoes of the assignment your soul remembers, even when your mind forgets. So if you've always felt too ancient for this generation, too sensitive for this timeline, too wise for what you've walked through, it's because you are. You didn't just age. You arrived with centuries in your spirit. You are not ahead of your time. You were sent on time for a generation that needs the fire your soul never forgot. Part 9. The hidden power. Your gift wasn't random. There's something you can do that others can't. Something that comes alive when no one's watching, and stuns the room when they finally do. You've downplayed it, hidden it, called it just a hobby, or not a big deal. But what you've been calling talent is actually treasure. You didn't learn it in a classroom. It wasn't passed down through blood. It was placed in you by God Himself. You've always had a way with words, a way with healing, a way with music, movement, business, or intercession. And when you move in that gift, people feel something shift. You've witnessed strange moments, where broken things mended when you prayed, where someone's entire mood changed just because you entered the room. You've had moments where time slowed, where what you did felt bigger than you, and something holy moved through your hands. Your voice, your presence, that wasn't ego, that was anointing. You see, the enemy didn't attack your gift because it was weak. He attacked it because it was divine. That's why you felt unseen. That's why you were discouraged. That's why your confidence was crushed early, because your gift was dangerous. With darkness, you may have spent years not using it, or giving it away to the wrong people, or convincing yourself it didn't matter. The chosen one. Your gift isn't just what you do, it's who you are. The prophets didn't ask for their fire. The healers didn't choose their hands. The poets didn't invent their rhythm. They were given something holy, and so were you. That gift, it's not for applause, it's not for validation. It's a weapon, a key that unlocks doors for others who can't find the way. So if you've ever wondered, why do I have this strange ability? Why does this thing come so easily to me when it's hard for others? The answer is simple. Because it was never random. It was assigned. And now it's time to remember what you were always meant to carry. Part 10. The Remembrance. You know who you are now. It didn't happen all at once. There was no burning bush, no angel in your bedroom, no loud trumpet declaring your arrival, just a quiet moment, somewhere between the pain and the promise. When you finally remembered, you looked in the mirror, and for the first time, you didn't just see your face. You saw your fire, not the wounds, not the trauma, not the timeline of what broke you. You saw something ancient, a presence that had always been there, waiting for you to recognize it. The world tried to make you forget. They called you names. They gave you titles, labeled you too much, too weird, too intense. But none of those names fit, because they weren't yours. You were never meant to be defined by culture. When you were created by heaven, the Matrix tried to mold you. The system tried to sell you an identity. But deep down, you always knew. You were different. You were sent. You were chosen. And now you remember. You were the child who stared at the stars, because you came from one. You were the teen who walked alone, because your footsteps couldn't follow shallow paths. You were the adult who almost gave up, because darkness saw your light waking up. But now, the sleep is over. The veil is lifted, and the one who forgot has remembered. You are not lost. You are recovered. You are not broken. You are reborn. You are not waiting for the world to tell you who you are. You already know, and once you remember, you can never go back. You were chosen to remember, so others could too. You thought this was just a video, just another voice on a screen. But now you know. This was a summoning, a sacred invitation to stop doubting and start walking. Not everyone will understand your fire. Not everyone will celebrate your light. But they were never meant to, because you weren't called to fit in. You were called to stand apart, to break patterns, to carry heaven into dark places that forgot what heaven felt like. Every sign you've felt, in every ache in your spirit, every storm you've survived, it wasn't madness, as it was marking. God marked you, not to crush you, but to commission you. You didn't remember overnight, but now that you have, there's no turning back, because when a chosen one remembers, the earth shifts, chains break, and those watching from the shadows say, something has awakened. You are not just chosen to rise. You are chosen to remind, to live in such a way that others around you begin to remember too. And when they ask, do I feel different around you? You'll smile and say, because I remembered who I am. And now, it's your turn. If this message stirred your soul, type I remember who I am in the comments below. Let the unseen realm hear your declaration. And if someone you love has forgotten their light, share this with them so they too can wake up. Because heaven is gathering the remembered. And if you're still standing, it's because you were born for this.